Hello, my noble band of outlaw samurai, coming at you live with a video. Well, if you saw the short I made, you would see the new sword stand. And me sipping on an American Clear Blackberry Lemonade, which, do not be fooled by the limited edition sticker. Every time I go to Walmart, they have like 3 or 4 crates of these damn things. But in any case, we all know the Cold Steel Italian Longsword. Yeah, ever since I got this new 8 sword stand, having all my swords within arm's reach is a lot easier to do. And we know that I made this little tassel. Well, I'm going to take this tassel off. Because the purpose of this video is how to make a budget sword frog. To which, which, if you don't know what a sword frog is, traditionally, a sword frog is more of a Renaissance era type of suspension system where it's basically, think of a beer koozie with a belt attachment, but instead of a beer bottle, you put a sword through it. And I have this, we all have them lying around our house, old, worn out belts that we don't know what to do with. I personally found this one while I was at work. I warn you, I dumpster dived because I found this in the trash can. And my first instinct was, why did they throw out a perfectly good piece of imitation leather? Yes, this is faux leather, but it will work for the purpose of this video. And it's still usable for what I intend to use it for, which is to make a suspension system for my longsword. Now, the basic principle of this is very simple. A sword frog is like this. You suspend the sword from your hip where it wraps around the scabbard, and then you have a hoop up here that you thread your belt through. Very quick, simple, rough and dirty. But then again, for the type of sword that I'm making the sword frog for, it makes sense. This is a man-at-arms edition sword. And what that means is, because of the black oxidized blade, this sword was made to go outside in your backyard and beat the shit out of it with. They don't put a black oxidized coating on a sword blade just for the aesthetics. It's put there to help keep rust off of it. Which, me personally, I don't keep my swords oiled. I've never had a problem with them getting rust on them. I did once, but that was a relatively 20-minute cleanup job, but still. What I'm going to do is I'm going to tie this onto the scabbard of this sword. Well, in this case, a sheath because it's not wood lined. The sheath of this sword, and I'm going to suspend it with simple everyday string. 2 reasons why I chose this aesthetic. 1, it's simplicity in its own right. So, not a lot of room to screw it up. 2, it fits the Renaissance era medieval aspect that this sword has. And even though this sword, it has the guard and everything, historically speaking, this would be a poor man's longsword. Even in modern terms, this sword retails for about $200. It's a poor man's longsword. A budget sword, really. And back in the Renaissance era, where a lot of the swords, they had the more noble, the swords that were held by aristocrats and people of status, they had more adorned hilts with engravings and carvings and bejeweled and everything. If I was to go back in the medieval era, minus this black oxidized coating on the blade, if I was to go back in the medieval era with this would basically be a poor man's longsword. they would look at me they would look at this no different than any normal everyday longsword. They might find the screw at the bottom weird, but aside from that, no different than any other longsword. That's because it looks the part. And just like back in the day, when you didn't have a lot of money, you made do with simplicity. This is a poor man's sword frog to fit a poor man's longsword. So, without further ado, first we're going to equal out the leather. And this has two different colors, as you can see. I'm going back on black or brown on black. Let's look at how the brown on black goes. Ooh, I very much like that two-tone difference. Okay, I'm going with brown on black. So we'll equal these out. And you're probably wondering why I'm leaving the sword in the scabbard to do this. Two reasons. One, so I know which way to hang the sword, because I like having the seam in the palm of my hand. And two, just to weigh down the scabbard so I don't have to fiddle with the weight and everything. So we're going to put it like so. Make sure it's a nice, secure fit. Then we're going to start wrapping the string around said sword. And I'm going to pause the video so you don't see me just wrapping and wrapping and wrapping. Well, I'll show you a little bit of wrapping first, I should say. So first, we're going to do a simple, basic wrapping. Nothing extravagant, nothing over the top, just a simple wrap. And make sure, again, to keep this tight. Because the less room you leave for failure, the better. You're basically attempting to friction fit the leather together. You can't really wrap it around the sword, or else it defeats the purpose of a sword frog, which is the ability to slip the sword in and out of it when you don't need it. So you can still wear the belt. This would have been the sword frog would have been an especially useful thing for the samurai of old Japan, because when a samurai entered the house of a fellow samurai or a daimyo or even visiting a friend, he would leave his katana, his longsword, at the door with one of the servants. The wakazaki would stay by his side all the time, but the longsword would be checked at the door as a sign of respect, saying that you really don't need your longsword here because you're visiting a friend or a family member, and you don't expect to have to fight your way out of their house. That looks good the way it is. Now, I'm leaving such a great amount of excess on here for two reasons. One, I haven't made the loop yet. And two, it provides me leverage when I'm tying the knot. Yeah, I really do feel like the samurai of old Japan, if they would have thought about it, would have adopted the sword frog because of their belief system, because of how they believe, because of their cultural beliefs. Yeah, now we're going to loop that. You don't want a big loop, or else it's going to be flopping around on the side of your hip ridiculously and look stupid. You want a relatively tolerant grip. You want a relatively low, small loop. Just something big enough to fit the diameter of whatever belt you're planning to use. Just the same as before. Wrapping to secure the belt loop. And with so much excess over here, I'm going to actually wrap that around here and wrap it again as kind of an even more secure uh, sword frog. Like I said, the sword frog may have been a Renaissance era trend and or idea, but it's not completely unfeasible that the people of the not the 14th because that's when the Renaissance began, but like the 13th and the 12th and the 11th century, it's not a complete unfathomable idea that they were used, but they became more common during the Renaissance, especially among war especially among no gentlemen who preferred the elegance of the rapier over the uh, almost broad savagery of the longsword. There we have it. Not pretty, not completely ugly. The holes give it some character. A poor man's sword frog, and it holds the sword nice and well. Good friction fit. And the best part of the sword frog, again, is that you can slip it off the sword. I want to make sure that the uh, string didn't close all the way, so I'm actually going to tie the string uh, once together as to prevent it from sliding up the sword blade, sliding down the sword frog. There you have it. Poor man's sword frog. That you can slip on and off and has a good friction fit between the two leathers. I know this video is kind of long and I did a lot of rambling, but I hope you found this informative and found a good use for old belts you're not wearing anymore. So until next time, my noble band of outlaws, Outlaw Samurai, tells all y'all, be safe in using your weapons, be crazy rednecks, I'm out, peace.